car crashes, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis, Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts with the attorneys of Hollis, Wright.
We're glad to have you join us for the attorneys. I'm Art Franklin, your host. You may have go ahead and grab a friend, call someone on the phone, your neighbor, your coworker, and tell them to join us on this show. We're going to share some really valuable information for you on privacy laws and their implications on your life, some valuable insights about the whole process of individual rights, the changing nature of privacy in this new digital age. So I'm really excited for this show to talk about that. So let's get right into it as we, of course, this guy right here, Josh Wright from Hollis Wright, the managing partner there at Hollis Wright. But also with us is Jim Roberts, who is a special guest for us. So glad to have you join us on the show.
Thanks. Thank you, Art.
Tell us just a little bit, Jim. First of all, welcome to being on. When I kind of got the pre-production material and started looking through it, this impacts everything from hacking into a bank account to your HIPAA medical rights to unauthorized video camera at an Airbnb. It's kind of a broad topic. How did you get into this area of the law? Because it honestly is not something that every lawyer does.
Right, and it's, I didn't do it for a long time until we finally got a client who had a problem with a privacy issue. We're still working on that case, as a matter of fact. The lady was in the midst of a child custody situation, and her ex-husband's wife is a licensed nurse practitioner who basically hacked into the Alabama database for medications, prescription drugs, and found out all about our client's prescription drug history. And they were apparently intending to use that in the child custody dispute. So we we filed a lawsuit and got involved that way.
Very interesting. Tell us a little bit about, I know that you've got Jim Roberts Law Firm. Tell us a little bit about your background. You've got some military background that we appreciate. Just tell us a little bit about that and kind of a little bit about your firm.
Okay. Well, I was draft eligible in Vietnam, and my draft never came up. My dad was a B-52 pilot, and he said, join the Air Force, which I went ahead and did. Did that for about 2.5 or 3 years. Eventually, the Air Force assigned you to technical schools and stuff, and I made my way out to Andrews Air Force Base, where I was part of the people that supported Air Force One. I was on duty the day that President Nixon resigned, and after that, President Ford gave me an appointment to go to West Point, which I did and graduated after those 4 years as a second lieutenant in the combat engineers. And interestingly enough, a few years later, I woke up in Panama on a monsoon, and I'm unzipping my sleeping bag in the torrent. And I thought, my gosh, Dad was right. The Air Force treats you much better than the Army does.
Welcome, right?
Yep.
All right, so first of all, thank you for your service. I know Art and I talked to you before we kind of got cranked up today. You've got an incredible history on the defense side of the bar and now doing some of this invasion of privacy work on our side of the bar. Thank you for your service.
Well,
I
thank
mean
you.
that. Talk a little bit about what is invasion of privacy, because I know that's kind of our topic today, but in general terms, how do you kind of explain that topic to people?
Well, most of us kind of know what it feels like. It's your private information, something that you don't want found out by the world, and somehow somebody gets into a personal area of your life and starts digging into it, frequently with the hope of either embarrassing you or using it to your disadvantage. And I kind of was reviewing things this morning myself, and I realized we don't have a lot of privacy laws until much recently, but the idea of privacy isn't even mentioned in the United States Constitution. The word privacy doesn't exist in the Constitution. The actual idea about privacy really comes from, believe it or not, Roe versus Wade, where Justice Douglas wrote a great concurring opinion about all about privacy. It wasn't about abortion or anything like that, but how we have privacy related to things like you can't be compelled to testify against yourself, your Fifth Amendment rights, or you can't have an illegal search and seizure, the Fourth Amendment rights. And as a result, privacy exists, it just wasn't mentioned in the Constitution. Now, the Alabama Constitution does mention privacy. And then we have laws that have been either written by the legislatures or that have sort of been found by the Supreme Courts, and that's how privacy developed.
And it is a broad topic, too.
It is. I'm fascinated already. You know, Josh, you told me how we're going to learn a lot, and already we're learning a lot from you just sitting here speaking with you. Let's get more into that privacy situation, because we're all concerned about privacy. You're concerned whether you turn your phone on and you get these text messages, and like you talk about something and all of a sudden it shows up there. What should we be concerned the most about in terms of protecting our privacy?
Well, most people are worried about their personal information in the medical area. You know, and that's what HIPAA was written for, was to instruct doctors and hospitals and medical people about protecting your personal medical information. But a lot of people are also worried about their banking information, their credit card information, their location information. In fact, just last week, for the very first time ever, the Federal Trade Commission reached a settlement with a data company that manages and controls location data off of phones and hardware or software. And for the first time, they were able to establish a settlement with a company like that. There's going to be a lot more of that in the future, but I thought that was an interesting first.
What is this issue of privacy, and we're going to talk probably in the second segment a little bit about how someone gets to a lawyer like you and files a privacy suit, but what do you see most often? I mean, you know, we talk about hacking and bank accounts. I mean, what are the trends right now in the area of invasion of privacy that people should be thinking about?
I think it's mainly financial and medical. Financial, of course, your credit cards, your bank information, and people frequently ignore easy things that help you keep your information private, like dual authentication, for instance. When your bank asks you, do you want to have a text message sent to your phone that allows you to log on after you put your logon information in, you ought to say yes, because that controls who gets that final PIN number or that final access number to get into your bank account. A lot of people ignore that, and they just go right in. But the things that we see the most are mainly medical and some financial information.
You know, what's interesting about this is these strategies by the criminals are so much more, difficult to read today compared to where it was even 5 years ago. And like, I find myself sending a group text to my family text with my children, like, hey, do not click on a link if you get this, just because I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so easy. Someone who was a little more naive, you know, would click on this and all of a sudden provide their bank information. Don't provide your social security number, those types of things. It's just crazy how times have changed.
Indeed, they're getting smarter.
Yeah.
Which means we have to get smarter in protecting our privacy. What are some of the changes that have happened that gives us more protection in the area of privacy?
Well, there have been several laws that have been passed, particularly in Alabama since about 2018. There have been 2 or 3 laws that have passed that have protected, that try to go and protect our privacy or help protect our privacy. One of them is the data breach law, which instructs managing companies of data that if they have a hack that gives access to a whole bunch of their customer information, they have 45 days to let customers know that hack has occurred, so that those customers can go out and protect themselves.
You know, when we come back, because I know we're getting ready to go to break, Art, I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that you can do to protect yourself. I mean, Jim mentioned one of them, which is double authentication from hacking and HIPAA, and how invasion of privacy really weaves its way in to protecting people if they find themselves the victim of one of these crimes.
All right, Jim Roberts is with us, along with us today, talking about privacy and how to protect your privacy. We're going to take a break. I want to remind you, though, there's something that you can do right now, and it's very simple. To scan that QR code on your television set so you can get in contact with Hollis Wright. Also follow us on all the social media platforms, on X, which was formerly Twitter, of course, on Instagram and Facebook. We'll take a break, but we've got a lot to discuss. Very fascinating conversation with Jim Roberts talking privacy here on The Attorneys. We'll be right back.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis Wright, a personal injury law firm, and thank you for watching The Attorneys. We hope you, a friend, or a loved one never needs legal counsel for a case. But if you do, the goal of the show is simple: to provide answers and legal counsel when you need it the most. Your call to the show is free and off air. So if you have questions specific to the show or related to other accident or injury topics, call, email, or text us. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, or go to hollis-wright.com and click on the Contact Us button. We know your time is valuable, so thank you for spending it with us and watching The Attorneys.
Front Porch Alabama is a first-of-its-kind website for shopping Alabama's boutiques, artists, and makers. We promote Shop Local on a statewide basis. We've discovered so many hidden gems in the retail world in Alabama, and we bring them to you right on your phone or your laptop.
State Traditions is an apparel company. As soon as I heard about the concept of Front Porch Alabama, I knew that that was something that we wanted to be a part of. And Front Porch Alabama allows us to reach customers that we would not reach otherwise.
Front Porch Alabama has such a wide variety of products from all across the state. I've got 2 girls that go to college, and I love picking out unique game day outfits for them. And if I find something that I love, I can just click and purchase right on my phone. It's super easy.
Start shopping at frontporchalabama.com today.
Did you know when you have to take a case all the way to trial, there is almost always insurance involved? Don't take on large insurance companies on your own. Our attorneys are standing by right now to give you a free consultation. At Hollis Wright, your result matters.
Welcome back to The Attorneys. The topic today is the invasion of privacy. Some really good stuff as we're talking with Jim Roberts. And Josh, I'm getting caught up here because he's like a professor sitting over there giving us some really good information.
Well, unbelievable information. And Jim, let's talk a little bit how this weaves into invasion of privacy suits. So, you know, we've talked a little bit about hacking. There's mail theft, there's bank information, HIPAA. How does invasion of privacy generally help protect people if they've gone through a crime like this?
Well, it doesn't protect you from getting into the crime. You know, when you see a lawyer, you've already been hurt. And unfortunately, most lawyers end up talking to people that have had problems. But when you've had a situation like this, then you need to go find legal skills, legal talent, who can help guide you through the legal system if you want to take advantage of the court system. It's a situation where many lawyers don't really know a lot about invasion of privacy, but we can eventually find somebody who does and file a lawsuit if necessary.
And talk a little bit about what type of damages can someone recover in a lawsuit like this? And I know it's a little different to each type case, but I mean, invasion of privacy on its face has a pretty broad ability to allow for recovery of civil damages.
Yeah, since most of us kind of innately know what an invasion of privacy feels like if you've been violated, then you would imagine that most jurors are going to be sensitive and sympathetic to the plaintiff or to the person who's been hurt. They've had privacy lawsuits that have gone for as high as $160 million. That was Hulk Hogan when he was videotaped illegally having sex with his girlfriend or with his friend's girl. Then there's situations where nightclub owners or managers have videotaped girls changing in the women's dressing room illegally, and not just the manager that did that, but the nightclub itself, his employer, was liable for $1.4 million in a couple of those cases. There's situations where the defendant or the bad actor has hacked into the prescription drug database. And in those situations, we seem to feel are most associated with child custody issues. But they have had, there was one in Illinois that was a $1.4 million verdict. There was one here in Alabama that was a $300,000 verdict. You know, so it's going to depend on the intensity of the situation and how sympathetic a jury's going to be.
Yeah. Just, and that answer made me think about some other things. These devices that we carry with us all the time, I wonder about how much privacy we really have, because it seems like they're listening all the time. Yeah. And before you used to say, "Hey Siri," now you don't have to say, "Hey Siri," just say Siri. So how much privacy do we have? And can we change things when we've got these around, because they're on all the time capturing information about us?
They're capturing your location, they're capturing who you've had electronic contact with. what tower you're hooked onto at a particular time. In fact, an FBI agent friend of mine was involved in chasing down the teenagers that burned churches a few years back here in Alabama. They located who the kids were by cell tower pings off of the kids' cell phones. And so, in a lot of lawsuits, as you know, Josh, you'll find cell tower information is going to be critical about establishing when a communication occurred, who it occurred with, and that sort of thing.
So that information that it captures, location and even conversations, because it records part of that. And what's the Alexa, all of those things capturing our information in our homes. Is that information that we can protect, or is it domain for anyone to use?
It's sort of protectable, but the rule of thumb is that the easier you make it for you to be able to use that information, the easier it is for somebody else to access it. Mm-hmm. If you have lax security skills or lax security measures, then somebody else can get into it much easier.
Yeah. Have you found that the medical side of HIPAA prescriptions, insurance information is kind of a common trend of areas where people are filing suits?
Yes. Especially like with HIPAA, for instance. Let's just focus on that. The HIPAA law itself tells doctors and nurses and hospitals that you have to protect patient information. It does not give people a private right to file a lawsuit, which is really odd, I thought. However, because we have privacy laws that do allow you to file lawsuits in Alabama, then you can use HIPAA as the standard of behavior that the somebody was supposed to use if, let's say, your doctor allowed an intrusion on your private health information.
And I mean, this arises in circumstances like we've seen an example of somebody was diagnosed with a terminal disease, and a nurse disclosed it to someone in the community that got to someone else that impacted the person's business and his partnership. And so, like that is a good example, is it not, of just how this can work its way out to the public when you never intended for that information to go out, and you wanted to be able to release that information under your own terms.
Exactly. In fact, there was a really famous Alabama Supreme Court case that followed almost this exact set of facts, where somebody went in for health issues, and somebody in that office told their mom, who was working at another company entirely, about the person that was in there for medical treatment. The mom spread the word, and then that affected that patient's employment later on.
I mean, it's fascinating stuff. But what measures in place to protect people in that situation? Because it seems like a lot of agencies understand that HIPAA laws are in place and we can't disclose certain information when we're talking about minors, when we're talking about a medical condition, won't even tell you whether the person is doing well or not. What measures are in place to protect our information from a HIPAA standpoint? Well,
it depends a lot on the doctor or the hospital or whatever. And if they're carefully shepherding that information so they're not letting it out and nobody else is going to find out about it, they've done their job. But if the information gets out somehow, either through a hack, somebody hacking into an electronic system that stores the information, or somebody telling their parents that, Art was in here for medical treatment, and that information gets out and affects your employment, then you have a lawsuit that you need to file.
Here's another thing, too, Art, that we don't think about. Employers have a lot of information about their employees. Yes. And employers can be responsible and liable for improper disclosure of that information, whether it's through a termination process, whether it's through the Social Security Administration for disability purposes. There are all sorts of restrictions on employers. So that's another potential area that I know falls into the invasion of privacy part of law.
Absolutely. And as lawyers, we search for somebody who can not only be responsible for the bad action, but who can also pay money for the bad action. It's just a fact of life that if you're going to file a lawsuit, that your client, your plaintiff, needs to be able to recover money. And employers are liable for their employees' bad acts a lot of times.
Yeah. I know we're getting ready to get a break. When we come back, I want to just talk about some things he's seen as far as some of the things that are on the horizon associated with invasion of privacy, and really talk a little bit more about some of the examples of verdicts out there.
Absolutely. So I told you it was going to be a really good show, that you needed to go ahead and call your neighbor, your coworkers, your friends, and tell them about this show as we really delve into this issue of invasion of privacy and get some really good information from Jim Roberts, who's joined us here on The Attorneys. You can also stay in contact with us, and if you need to reach one of the attorneys of Hollis Wright, all you have to do is give them a call at 1-844-LAW-TALK. You get someone on the other end of the line. That call is free, and it is confidential, so you can do it right now. They're standing by to hear from you. Stay with us. We'll take a break, and we'll continue in just a moment.
Thank you for watching The Attorneys each Sunday night, where we come to your living room to provide free legal advice in a confidential, off-air setting. Unfortunately, with the number of calls, texts, and emails that come in during the show, we can't always get to everything. But know this, Hollis Wright is open all week long. You call us at 844-LAW-TALK and we're going to answer your question for free. Thank you for watching The Attorneys, and we look forward to seeing you and talking to you soon. We love this state and its great people. People that are worth fighting for in their lowest moments. It's what drives our lawyers to do what we do. We're here right now to fight for you. At Hollis Wright, your result matters.
Welcome back to The Attorneys. So much to learn about the invasion of privacy. I also want to remind you there's a QR code on your television screen. I'd like you to go ahead and scan that QR code right now, and you will get in contact with someone at Hollis Wright. Right now, we are with Josh Wright of Hollis Wright, the managing partner, and Jim Roberts is our special guest as we're talking invasion of privacy.
You know, one of the cases that I've always thought is interesting is there's a case related to a high school student who had some psychiatric care and counseling. You recall this case?
Yes.
Talk just a little bit about that and how that played over into invasion of privacy.
Oh, sure. The young person was suicidal, and the parents were extremely concerned about that. So they committed the child to a psychiatric hospital with strict instructions not to share any medical information with anyone. Well, somebody at the psychiatric hospital sent the child's medical information to a counselor at the kid's school, high school. And that immediately became known to the parents, but it also affected how that high school interacted with the child in the future. And of course, it made the child feel uncomfortable as well. The parents sued, and they were covered $200,000. Mm-hmm.
The other high-profile case that I recall in the last decade is the Erin Andrews case, which was, spying on her. That was a huge case.
It was, and the invasion of privacy issue was fascinating there. The guy who committed the crimes called from a house phone at a Marriott hotel. He called the front desk to find out where Erin Andrews was staying. She was the ESPN sports reporter who was there to do a football game. And they told him what room she was in. So he goes up to the desk after that and makes arrangements to get the room next door to her. And then in the middle of the night, he gets a camera attached to her peephole on the outside of her door and films her while she's walking around inside her room without her knowledge. She comes out of the shower without any clothes on, and he gets that all in video, and then he posts it on the internet. She ends up suing him and Marriott and gets a $55 million verdict.
Yeah, I remember that as one of the most high-profile things. And how invasive is that? Like, that's unbelievable. What crime you can see.
Yeah, and certainly that person went to great lengths to try to get some footage of Erin Andrews. What about in public? When you're just the public domain out there, I mean, you often wonder how much privacy you have when you're walking down the street, you're on someone's property, but you're still in view of the general public. Is there any privacy that's involved with that?
That's a great question, and it really depends a lot on the facts. Generally speaking, if you're in public, you're not going to have an expectation of privacy. That's kind of one of the guides, legal guidelines on whether you're going to have a privacy issue or privacy lawsuit. But it might differ. For instance, in 1964, there was a really famous Alabama Supreme Court case involving a newspaper who published a picture from Coleman of a lady who was at a state fair, and a wind draft blew her dress up over her head, and they took a picture right at that moment and then put it in the paper. And the Alabama Supreme Court said that was an invasion of privacy because she had no idea that the wind was going to blow that dress up. It wasn't like Marilyn Monroe who staged that scene.
Right.
That lady had that, it just happened to her. And the photograph really had nothing to do with anything about the state fair other than it occurred at the state fair. So the Alabama Supreme Court said that was an invasion of privacy.
That makes sense.
Yeah, no, I agree. How protected are pharmacy records? I recall specifically a call in the last year that we received from a small town, related to a small town pharmacy, where they believed that the pharmacist or the pharmacy tech was providing information that the person was on antidepressants, and they were very upset about that because it was getting out in the community. How protected, I mean, people are protected through our privacy rights with that, are they not?
Absolutely, they are to some extent, and I hate to sound like a lawyer, but you got to qualify the answer with that. The information is protected from public disclosure to the average person. You and I can't go in and find out about Art's pharmacy records. But the police departments, FBI, any police agency is pretty much able to get anything they want. The guidelines for HIPAA, they're about a quarter-inch thick, issued by the federal government. Those give the pharmacies rules or regulations on how they should handle pharmacy records with regards to police requests. And they basically say handle them however you want. So virtually all of the major pharmacies throughout the United States, if they get a request from a police department, they turn your records over. And they're not required to tell you about it unless there's a specific state law that forces them to. There's been some pharmacies that have been hit on that nationally, as I recall, too. Oh, well, the publicity is really bad right now. In December of 2023, the House of Representatives, U.S. House of Representatives, began investigations into this situation, and they're in the midst of having a conversation, so to speak, with all the major pharmacies about what to do about this response to police requests for records.
That seems like a big loophole, because if they can just turn them over, I think I have a certain degree of privacy in terms of my records at the hospital. But if I leave the hospital and I go get a medication at a pharmacy, that medication pretty much tells you what my condition is. Yep. So there's a whole loophole right there that just opens the door for your information no longer being private.
Yeah, and most of us kind of expect that the police departments are asking questions about criminal situations.
But not always.
But not always, that's true. You run into police officers, rogue police officers, who are trying to find out information just because they want to know, or they've got a friend who they can give the information to that will help them. And you would expect a certain amount of privacy for your medical information, especially with what we know about HIPAA. Yeah. But there is none at pharmacies right now.
Wow. So with just one final question related to people's criminal records, do you think that's protected if it's in the public domain insofar as it relates to being in the Alicourt system, for example, stuff that you and I use on a daily basis? Is someone's criminal record, you think, protected as from a privacy right perspective?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. It's anybody can buy a subscription to Alicourt, and don't have to be a lawyer. You can be anybody in the world. And once you get that subscription, you're authorized to get in any kind of records you want. Great information from Jim, and stuff to think about to protect ourselves. Double authentication. I'm doing that every time now. Thank you for being on. It was great to see you. Thank you, John.
Good to see you. Certainly appreciate it. It was a very fascinating conversation. So glad you joined us as well. As we also want to remind you, you can reach us at 1-844-LAW-TALK. It is free. It is confidential. The free part kind of reminds you like Ashford and Simpson. You know that song? It don't cost you nothing. If you don't know it, Google it and continue to watch us. We'll see you back here next week for another edition of The Attorneys.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by Hollis Wright.